Good morning, everybody. It is April 6th. This is a meeting of the Darien Board of Education's Curriculum Subcommittee. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 25th at 8:30. Today, we have Francis Chinasko and Keith Keeler here from English and Social Studies to give us an update of what's going on. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Tran.
Good morning. We will start with social studies. You are not having deja vu. Francis and Keith have both been here this year already. They did a pretty detailed presentation earlier in the fall on the selection of instructional materials. So this is the regular process of providing department updates. Last year, Keith's focused on inquiry, and it's really moving to the next instructional focus for this year. And I'll talk a bit about Francis's before he begins. So turn it over to Mr. Keeler.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to give this update. While I'm going to give a kind of a general overview in terms of what we've been doing in social studies, my focus today is going to be on diving into critical thinking a little bit further. In terms of our agenda and what we're trying to accomplish, I'm going to go over some of the courses that we have in the department, some of our goals that we've been working towards this year, the work that we've done. We'll review very briefly, because last year, and I think even prior to that, we've talked a little bit about the frameworks for social studies and kind of where some of our direction for the courses comes from the state. And then we'll dive into talking about critical thinking, not only defining it, but then also looking at examples of it from reading, writing, discussion, source analysis. And I tried to make this an example-rich presentation to try to bring to life what some of that work that we do in social studies classes actually looks like. So we have some videos, I have some samples, some excerpts of student writing that we can take a look at, which we'll see momentarily. So in terms of our courses, just to give you a quick overview, at Middlesex, we have three courses, one per year, and the first 2 years, 6th and 7th grade, really are like a 2-year sequence where we're studying geography and history. In the 6th grade, we're looking at the Eastern Hemisphere, and in 7th grade, we're looking at Western Hemisphere. In 8th grade, the study is focused on American history. And then as students move on into 9th grade, the first class that they have there is Western Civilization, which is focused on European history. And then as we move into 10th grade, they'll take World Studies, followed by American history and law and government. In the sophomore year, students do have the opportunity to take honors level core courses. So they can take honors World Studies as 10th graders, AP US History as 11th graders, and AP Government and Politics as seniors. We have an application process and a waiver process that takes place during the middle and into the middle of the year in their freshman year moving in. But students can move into the honors courses basically any year that they want to. It's not a one and done sort of a setup. So we do allow for that flexibility for students to move in and out as it suits their schedule best. In terms of our electives, we have a really robust offering. So what I tried to give you here was a list of all of our course offerings, all of our electives, as well as the grade where students are allowed to take them. So really they focus primarily on 11th and 12th grade, but we have some that are open to 10th graders as well. You can see that the list that we have here touches on additional history courses, but also focuses on other areas within the social sciences. So we have psychology, we have philosophy, we have geography, we have several economics courses. From year to year, not all of them will run. It kind of depends on what the student enrollment has been. This year we have about 350-ish students who are enrolled in some of our elective courses. And the numbers are pretty pretty typical from year to year. We don't see huge swings in our electives, but some years there may not be enrollment to run a course, and other years we may need multiple sections of it. A good example is coming up this coming year, our human geography class, which I kind of expected, is going to grow. You probably recall that in the fall/winter, we talked about opening up human geography to 11th graders. So with now having another pool of students who could take the course, it's going to grow this year. Once the 11th graders finish it next year, they're not going to obviously take it as seniors. So I'd expect that we'd see another change coming up. So things like that take place from year to year, but that's generally what that looks like. So that's just a little bit about our courses, just to kind of give that overview. In terms of the work that we've done in social studies, we spent time working on our long-term transfer goals, which I will just show you, should be right here. So these are, the most important skills that we're trying to instill in our students in the work that we do from grades 6 through 12. And while you can see them up here, we are focusing primarily on their ability to read, to be curious and research, to think, and to express themselves. That's kind of the core of what we're trying to do in the social studies. So we developed these long-term transfer goals. So I go back. We also have then continued to agree on high priority standards, developing and refining essential questions for our courses. I had shared some of those in previous presentations as well as identifying the skills, the knowledge, and the understandings that students need in our courses. We started entering this into EduPlanet 21 last summer, but we were really kind of in the early stages of getting used to the platform and getting used to doing that work. And in terms of what's coming up, I anticipate this late spring into summer to be an opportunity for us to really move forward with that. My plan is to continue to build capacity within the department to use the platform. I think we're already comfortable with the different components of it. It's really a question of trying to move information and to also, when we sit down to do this, we don't want to make it a copy and paste. We want to make sure that we're really thoughtful and that we're reviewing the curriculum that we have. And so that will start this summer. We do have a 4-year plan in place to make sure that we get it all in for our core classes as well as for our electives. Okay. In terms of our,
We saw that, by the way. You saw the rotation there.
it's pretty fancy. Yeah, it's pretty
Just
fancy.
for the record, like
I tried to make it visually appealing for you so you can have a little bit of that flair. I'll be very brief with this slide because I hope at this point everyone is thinking, we get it, Keith. We understand what the Connecticut frameworks are, but just to be clear, that's the core document that really directs the work that we do in social studies. At its core is the inquiry arc. And that inquiry arc has 4 dimensions, 4 stages. And to put them in the simplest of terms, that's basically asking questions, disciplinary learning, which is the content and skills that students need to do the source analysis, which is the 3rd dimension. And then the last piece is drawing and sharing conclusions. The Connecticut frameworks really kind of hit on the importance of sharing out your findings and communicating that with others and being able to do that in a variety of formats. And you'll have a chance to see what that looks like in some of our classes in just a moment. Our big goal is to ensure that we have students who are capable citizens, who are ready to interact in the world around them and to understand the world around them. And so we have a tendency to focus on our reading, our writing, our researching, and ultimately thinking. And that's what brings me to our critical thinking focus for today. Part of why I wanted to emphasize this is I think sometimes the term critical thinking can be misunderstood. And actually, at times, the opposite conclusion of what critical thinking is what people understand it to be. Critical thinking is very much about independent thinking. And so I've tried to list some of what critical thinking is here. It's about asking questions and seeking answers. It's about not just accepting things at face value. It's about making connections, whether that's a personal connection to content or making connections between time and place that have previously been studied. It's about understanding nuance and seeking that nuance. And it's also about understanding perspective. And then again, part of this is also, how do we communicate this out? What do we do with this information? And there's a great opportunity there when we talk about critical thinking to allow students to take some of the liberties of how they're going to communicate those ideas to others. And that's a great way of seeing their thinking. So if that's what we're trying to do, what are we trying to avoid? The things that we're trying to avoid are having everyone just believe the same thing. We're trying to avoid having students be resistant to asking questions. We want them to be curious. We want them to ask questions. We don't want them to hold back information or just be content to say, this is enough. I get the gist of it. We want them to always want to dive deeper and have a deeper understanding of the material that they're being exposed to. Certainly, this idea of critical thinking is not unique to social studies. While it's something that we do, we do a lot. I know that any department could be up here talking about this as well. And I think last week, Mr. Dockham did a nice job of highlighting it. I don't know that he necessarily used the word, but it's something that certainly was reflected there. And it is something that is broadly work that we do, and it really connects strongly to the vision of the graduate. So I've given just a few of those dimensions of the vision of the graduate that are really important. And you can see the tie-ins with independence, curiosity, empathy and understanding others, communication and creativity. So where do we find this critical thinking? What does this actually look like in our classes? Well, we see it primarily when we are asking students to read, when we're asking them to engage in source work or source analysis. We see it when students are writing, and we also see it in the discussions that we have or the presentations that we have in our classes. So here's the part where you'll get a chance to see more of our classes, and I'll be able to talk about some examples that, what I'd like to do here is give you a sense of 6 through 12 between pictures and descriptions of classes, assignments that teachers have given, as well as examples of student work and videos of students working, give you a sense of, well, what does this actually look like in a history class, in a social studies class. So in a 6th grade classroom here, we have our 6th grade students who are looking at 2 texts that are written about the exact same event. The interactions and the first exchanges between European settlers to the Congo and the people who are native to that area. And so as they're looking at these 2 explanations of the same event, they're trying to look at what words are being used, what choices did the author make, and how might that help us to understand what the author was trying to convey. Who was their audience? What were they trying to say about that? So this happens to be in like a whole class format where they're discussing it and going through it together. But certainly this can also happen in smaller groups, which we'll see in just a moment as well. This is a poster that hangs in a 6th grade classroom. This kind of looks at reading specifically, and this protocol called Questioning the Author. This protocol came out of the work that we did this year in our departmental professional development. And if I can take just a brief aside to explain kind of where that came from, what that looked like. So as the department chair, I have the opportunity in the form of goal setting meetings, mid-year meetings, end-of-year meetings, observations, post-observations, as well as all of the many informal discussions or PLC or department meeting type discussions I have with teachers to really take stock of how are things going. And all of those discussions allow me to see larger trends. And so as we went through last school year, one of the trends that I noticed was I kept hearing that, I'd love for my students to be able to do more when they're reading. And so this became our departmental focus for this school year. So when we have our professional development time and we have our departmental time, that was what we worked on. And so you can see I've given you just tried to capture our work this year in a slide. So this is what I'm sharing. But what we tried to do was to break down the work that we do around reading with before reading strategies. So the things that we do prior to students are actually reading a text, during reading strategies, things that they can do that actually help them in the moment. And then after reading strategies, how we might spur on conversation or how we might get them to reflect on what they've just been exposed to. So one of the other benefits that this departmental professional development has is we meet in vertically aligned groups. And so we have groups of grade 6 through grade 12 teachers who have a chance to learn from each other. In this case, this year, one of the things that I had asked everyone to do was to bring with them one of the readings that they gave in the last week, basically. And so we have an opportunity to see kind of in real time, well, what are we asking students to do? What does it look like in grade 6? How does grade 6 build on 7, build up to 7 and 8, and so on? And we also have an opportunity to learn from each other's expertise. And we really do have a strong department with a lot of expertise. And so hearing the different strategies that teachers use has been really helpful. I expose teachers to additional strategies, and then we can reflect on how did they work, what went well. And that's, again, where we would see like this questioning the author comes in. This is a protocol that we can use to really dive into a text to understand it a little bit more deeply. Who wrote the text? What points are being made? Is there anything missing from this? It's just a way to help students investigate further. In terms of our reading at DHS, this is a picture of a 11th grade classroom. The students the night before had just read the majority decision in the Brown versus the Board of Education Supreme Court case. While they read that independently, when they came into class, they met in groups. When they met in groups, they identified the core idea and the line that best represented it from the entirety of their text. So they have to understand the overall idea as well as have a knowledge of the text that's strong enough that they can talk about this. They highlighted them as a group, as a class, and then basically went through and said, well, is this really the best one? Does this really reflect the core idea? And so there's a lot of layers to understanding here. Sorry.
Not if I may just ask a question, not about this Brown versus Brown or any other case. Right?
Sure.
I maybe should know this, but that's okay. Do the kids ever look at the source of funding for resources, whether it's literature or whether it's research they're reading? Do they ever look at like not just the author, but where did the source of funding come? Does that influence? Is it not? I'm curious.
I think it can. Yes. Yeah. So I would say that's definitely something that would happen with our higher grades. Definitely not something we would do with younger students. But part of what we would do is ask a question like, well, what is the occasion for which this person is writing? Is this a personal letter between two friends that we've stumbled onto in history, or is this something that was purposely put forward? If so, who put it forward? Who wanted it? Yeah. So definitely looking at those kind of layers and what's behind it are certainly important. In terms of how we engage with sources is kind of what we're talking about. When we interrogate a source, who said it? Why did they say it? What did it mean? Is there a hidden meaning? Are there elements of this that we have to understand more deeply? We also want our students to really be actively engaged with sources. So we're always asking them to annotate. And this is something you see moving from 6th grade up to 12th grade. We want them to look at what questions does it raise for me? What connections can I make? What is the core main idea? And what are those phrases that really stand out as being important or influential? That's all if we're talking about texts, though. And we do have some other types of sources. And the first source that I'm going to ask Michelle to play in just a second here is a video from an 8th grade classroom. And it's only about 15 seconds long. It'll just be a little taste of what they might be exposed to in class. And so I apologize if that is going to be stuck with you for the rest of the day and into the weekend. It is an unfortunately catchy tune, but this is an example of a campaign song from the middle of the 1800s in William Henry Harrison's campaign. And so in this 8th grade classroom, they would start by looking at this, watching this recreation of this campaign song, and then looking at, well, what is it actually saying? How is it played? What does the music sound like? Trying to, again, look at the different layers that are there for it. The bottom picture on the left side here is a screenshot of a Google Classroom. I had walked into this class and it was kind of impossible to capture this, but the students in this class were being asked to look at the 1950s and try to understand where this value and this belief in conformity came from by watching these educational videos that would have been typically shown to high school students of that age. And so this is, again, it's a source analysis, but it's a non-traditional source. Political cartoons, music, in later times, movies or videos can also be helpful for this. Oh, sorry, that's mine. I think I got it. I got it. There it is. I just wanted to keep listening to it on repeat. So shifting then to look at critical thinking and writing, this is an excerpt from a student's paper, from a student's historical fiction piece about the 49ers and the people who moved west to California to look for gold. And I bolded just 2 lines in here that I think really illustrate what this student did a nice job of, which is making this sound like a story while also talking about history. And so this movement west, while it sounded great and finding gold with a little bit of work was very appealing to many, the reality is that there wasn't that much gold for people to get. And a lot of the people who went there didn't make money doing it. And the people who were really successful, as the second bolded piece describes, were those who sold resources to the miners. So if you came up with a way to add a rivet to a pair of jeans that would allow your pockets not to rip as your tools and gold were going in and out of your pockets, you might stand to make a lot of money and be pairs of jeans that people would want to buy today with Levi Strauss. So that's one of the ways that you can see some of this student thinking through their writing, those different layers again. Here is 2 thesis statements that reach entirely different conclusions about Andrew Carnegie. They are based on the same set of documents for a DBQ. And so in short, one student says that Andrew Carnegie should really be remembered as a robber baron, for someone who took advantage of the working conditions of the time for his own personal gain. And another said that he was a captain of industry who should be celebrated. The documents the students get obviously are from many different perspectives. So the students, these 2 thesis statements and the papers that were accompanying them earned high marks. There is no right answer. And that's the point that I'd like to illustrate here, is that there's not a singular vision that the teacher's saying, as long as you tell me this, you'll be in a good place. It really is about the quality of your argument and how well you support that with evidence. And this was a really great example when I had asked some teachers, can you send me a couple of thesis statements? And I got this. I thought it was a really great illustration of that point. So in shifting away from some of our writing, we also have our class discussions or presentations. This is an example of a 9th grade Western Civ class, and they're engaged in Enlightenment madness. It won't look like madness right now. It's just going to be a single student talking for a few seconds here. But basically what they're trying to, I'll let it, we can let it play for a few seconds, Michelle, and I'll talk about it. Go ahead. Thank you.
First, I'm going to go over the summary of the folks with client office actually created the idea of like the idea that 7 hours to create all of those
Michelle, that's fine for now. It's a little hard to hear, but basically, this student is explaining why Isaac Newton should be regarded as an influential person from the Enlightenment. So everyone in the class had an Enlightenment thinker that they had to research and they had to understand. And then in a March Madness only Enlightenment version, we have brackets and the student is faced off against another student. They each share why their thinker was influential. The class makes decisions about who should go on to the next round, and each round looks at these people in a slightly different way for why they were influential in the Enlightenment, why they were influential today. So there's lots of opportunities for students to engage in work like this. We also have, okay, so one of the problems that I had in putting this presentation together, quite honestly, is that when I tried to capture students actively involved, there was nothing that you could hear in the room because it was quite loud. And that was a wonderful thing to hear because every student is engaged, every student is talking. So this one, I hope that you'll be able to hear. But this is the top video here is a video of American history students talking, in a speakeasy. So you'll have some nice background music playing. They each came in as a person from the 1920s, again, that they had researched and came to understand, and are now talking about who should be regarded as the icon of the 1920s. Clearly, I'm not a videographer, but the students here are trying to make a point that there's a connection between what was happening at the end of the decade in the 20s, as well as the music that was being played and what that was like. This bottom video that I have is from another American history class where I actually was initially capturing the students listening to FDR's fireside chat about the banking crisis. And that was really wonderful to see. But then as I sat in the room and listened a little bit more, this very organic discussion started. And I felt like I would be remiss not to capture this. And so this is a group of students who, without prompting from their teacher, has started to bring in discussions of modern journalism and modern politics and draw parallels and connections to FDR's situation and his use of the fireside chat. Michelle, we can play that one. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, well, he doesn't just put it in, Hoover, his party did law, right? Hoover kind of looked at FDR's PR
So the point I'm trying to illustrate with this is this is a wonderful thing to have happen in class. Students are making connections. They weren't necessarily asking questions here as much as they were making a lot of observations. But you can see that the teacher kind of allows for multiple students to talk and will, as needed, add in when that comes in. But also, while the students were doing a wonderful job of keeping it still based on FDR and their historical studies, you can see that the teacher also then takes an opportunity to bring it right back to what they're studying and make that transition. So it's a way for us to help students explore their curiosities, develop a deeper understanding. And this is, in some of the previous discussions that I've had here at the board and some of the presentations we made, this is a video that I think that would have been helpful just to show what happens in our social studies classes.
So, sorry, Keith, so those conversations are easier in the science class like this, right? That they can have that. So can you talk a little bit
Sure.
about how those conversations happen in the larger classes?
Yeah, I mean, this did happen to be a very small class, but I think it would run very similarly. This class is also upperclassmen, so they didn't necessarily need a lot of kind of protocols of hand raising and calling on students, but that's kind of what it would look like maybe if it was a much larger class. And you would have the teacher maybe directing it a little bit more and kind of saying, okay, let's hear from different students, and if they wanted to engage with that, they certainly could. But the way that it kind of comes up organically with a student who just makes an observation to say, I'm not sure if this would actually happen today, or what would happen if somebody made a fireside chat like this, how would it be received? That happens in any size class and any grade level. And really, it's just a question of what we do to kind of direct it back to our studies. In terms of that's okay. I want to move on. There we go. The last example that I have for you is just a kind of a brief, again, it's kind of pulled from a Google Classroom assignment for our urban studies class, which used to be called humanities. So here you can see that the teacher has set this up for students to work in partners. They're purposely choosing from a variety of articles that they would be given, but they're also being asked to look at what are the pros, what are the cons. So they're looking at articles that are going to give them different perspectives. And between the two of them, they'll now have this kind of wealth of information to pull from to be able to have more specific contributions that they can make then to a class discussion, to like a seminar type of a discussion. So I hope that this snapshot into our classes was a helpful one to try to illustrate some of the work that we do and what that critical thinking looks like in its different facets. And I'd like to, again, thank the Social Studies Department and all of their classes. It was in trying to, it's not necessarily that natural for me to take videos of everything that I see. And so I was really trying to be conscious about capturing what would be helpful to illustrate to others what happens in our classrooms. And I would like to just say I had a wonderful chance to really see so many great things that were happening, and students who were really, really involved and really engaged with the work at every different level. So I'm happy if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if I can clarify anything further, please let me know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That is really informative, and I love the videos. I think it just illustrates what's actually happening inside of our buildings, and I think there's some really, really good stuff happening. I guess my first question is more of an operational question. We hear, and I'm sure you do too, a lot about Western Civ. And Western Civ in 9th grade, there's no honors social studies class. Has there been any thought about creating an honors Western Civ option that maybe, I feel like that's the class that most people struggle in 9th grade, across the board, from my understanding, anecdotally. Is there a way that could be, split? I don't know, but just,
Yes,
is there not an honors chance in 9th grade?
We absolutely have. We have revisited that discussion. So in years past, we did look at this, and we said ultimately that we felt like our current setup, which is to have the one course, was served our students best. But it is something that we have revisited in the context of other courses and other proposals that are going on in the school. It seemed appropriate to revisit that. So what I can tell you is that we are talking about it still. We've had a couple of department meetings where we've had a chance to talk about this. I've had a chance to meet with most of the ninth grade teachers, and frankly, we're still split. So there's not a clear yet, this is the best path that we need to take. We want to make sure that whatever path we choose is going to really be to the benefit of all of our students. So what I can promise is that we are looking at it and we are working on it. And it's something that we're taking under consideration.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I too love the examples. I also appreciate looking at the Connecticut framework. I think it's a good reminder that does exist. There is something that we are kind of beholden to, or another layer. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but just for a second, could we
Sure.
talk a little bit about the relationship between critical thinking and skepticism? I feel like that's sort of something that comes up, maybe not defined that way,
Yeah.
but I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and I should add to I'll come back to the frameworks in a second because there's one other little note that I should have added before to that. I mean, I think we want our students to be skeptical of what they're exposed to. And they get exposed to huge volumes of information, whether it's through their phones or through, they have access to so much. And so I think it is really important that they are always wondering and kind of looking at those questions that we talked about. Who's putting the information out there? What is the information saying? What does it mean? Where did it come from? So I think that is another way I think of putting what I had tried to say, like we want to see more nuance. We want to see students not just accept things at face value, and whether through modeling in class when we look at primary sources or when we look at any reading really, any text really, or through their own independent work and our follow-up with them and the work that we do in classes. That's one of the things we want to see, is that we're not just taking things at face value and we're really trying to understand them at their core. And the point I should have added before about the frameworks is that a year ago when I was here, I had said that very soon the state should be releasing the content standards, and that statement is still true. Very soon those should be coming out. They're kind of available, but not for use yet. They're still in the review stage. But every time I attend a meeting that has a social studies meeting, we kind of hear the same thing now for a year. So hopefully soon, but I don't know when it will come. But that will be something that when it does come out, we'll certainly be looking closely at and seeing, how does it align with the work that we're doing, and are there any shifts that we have to make.
One other question.
Go for it.
Any thoughts about maybe a history travel experience down the road?
Before the meeting started, we were talking a little bit about that, and it does sound, it's very enticing. Yes. And there's probably a few places we could go that would be pretty good.
Absolutely.
So it's something that we certainly would be interested in, but I'll have to take that back to the department and talk with them.
Yeah, that around. I had a question for Chris too, actually. That's right. I was just curious, and maybe I should know this. Is it a heavier lift for one department versus another to transfer to Edge Planet?
Yes,
I would think so.
for lots of reasons. It depends on the current, where their curriculum is currently. So that's going to make a big difference. And the part that is the most complex is agreement on what the actual assessment is. Because the idea is EduPlanet's about what are the guaranteed experiences. So no matter who is teaching a course, students will experience this content, they'll read these things, and they'll be assessed this way. And so it really creates the space for departments to come together and make those decisions. Some departments are just further along in their thinking on that. So that would be the biggest challenge.
Got it. Thank you.
Are there electives that don't regularly run? Like, I think as a board, we're always kind of looking at what is in our course catalog that
Yeah.
maybe doesn't need to be. And are there things that you think we should be offering that we are not?
So to the first question, are the things that don't regularly run? Not exactly. Anything that's in our course catalog is something that has run recently. What does, what ultimately happens is around right at this exact time of year, students have been exposed to the electives and heard about them from their teachers. They've had opportunities to meet and talk with their teachers. They've met with their counselors. They've selected the courses they want. And then the department chairs were given those numbers to see, how many students wanted which courses. And then we go through the work of figuring out what does that actually look like in terms of how many different sections will we need of particular classes. So if we have really low enrollment, then sometimes there are classes that won't run. So a couple that are on that list that are not currently running this year are philosophy, contemporary issues, and our Black and African American and Latino and Puerto Rican studies course. The enrollment for each of those courses was too low for us to run that class. But year over year, you'll, just as I was describing what happens with the human geography class, where you'll have a bigger group come through, and then because more students have taken it, the next year is naturally going to be smaller. For these electives that tend to already be small, that can be what pushes them below that level where it's like, I don't think we should be running a class with this few students in it, or we can run a class with that. So there are some, like psychology is a class that's, I would be shocked if we ever had that happen to. So
Right.
there are some that are maybe our safer courses or that have grown over the years. But the ones that I listed are the ones that tend to be a little bit more on the threshold where there's one section and it's not an overflowing section at
Right.
that.
And the Black Latinx one, that is required by the state that we offer that. So that will never come
Yeah,
off.
required that we offer it.
Right.
And then, hopefully we always hope that we'll have that enrollment to run it. But if not, it'll be an offering that students can take. So
No, there are others that are, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are no other electives that we are required to offer.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. And there's nothing else that we're required to offer. And we have lots of discussions about, other possible offerings for the department. One of the things we try to be really conscious of is that we're not cannibalizing the classes that already exist and taking I think I had mentioned that the number before was about 350 students who were taking electives this year with us. If we add a lot of classes to that, then we may have a lot of classes that are on that threshold of not running. So we try to be thoughtful about it. We also try to be responsive to our students. And so if we see year over year a class that doesn't run, then that's something that we would look at pulling out and replacing. So,
Thank you for that diligence.
I'm good. Thank you so much.
All right.
thank you very much.
Dr. Abbott, you may have anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
all
you
right.
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Keeler. That was excellent. Appreciate it.
For the English presentation, Francis is going to address some of the things that have been comments at the larger board table this year relating to grammar. So this is just some information on some grammar instruction that is in fact in place. The other piece are some big ideas about changes in courses, not for next year, but for the following year. So just interested to hear your thinking because we would have official proposals coming in the fall after they visit the curriculum council.
Okay, well, good morning. It's great to be here and have a chance to share with you all of the fabulous work that our teachers are doing for our students in secondary English. If I'm a little more scripted than usual, it's because I want to make sure that we can get out of here at least halfway through the upcoming break. But I'm trying to keep myself on course here. And I just want, I really loved Mr. Keeler's presentation. And as you know, we've borrowed the world languages idea to take these international trips. So if in the future I have a lot of videos in my presentation, you'll know where we got that idea. So what I'd like to do today is I'm going to do something a little bit different, and it's more of a thematic presentation of what we do with reading, writing, and the importance of student choice. And before I get to that, I'm going to adhere to what all of my department chair colleagues have done and provide you with an update on curriculum writing and on our transition to EduPlanet 21. And I'm going to start with English 10. In June, our entire English 10 team of teachers came together to work with me on completely revising that course from top to bottom. This was the first occasion that I worked with a team using the Understanding by Design framework. And so we began with an essential question for the course, and by prioritizing the learning standards to target throughout, the essential question that our teachers landed on was, how does perspective shape our understanding of storytelling ourselves in the world? We took that essential question and we took the learning standards that we were targeting, and essentially we started with the outcome, the student outcome of the course, and developed the final exam, which is really a series of projects that culminates in the exam. And then we worked backwards and did the units and thinking about the content and the skills and the understandings that we want our students to know throughout the course so that they're prepared and they're in a position to be successful on that final exam project. I want to say that our team did a fantastic job. They're very proud of the work. I'm very proud of the work, and it's a highlight of my curriculum writing since I've been in this position for the last 6 years. I want to also give a shout out to our English A team. That is our grade 6 reading class. They did some work this summer on vocabulary instruction. And so we began with research on best practices for vocabulary acquisition at the middle school level. That was translated into a unit that has come at the beginning of the year, and the strategies for vocabulary building that are started in that unit are looped throughout the year in our other units. And I just want to say that based on the research and what we've done here isn't something akin to identifying a list of words that are important to know as you head into a given text, but the focus was on academic language that would translate throughout the year, certainly in English A, but not only in English, but to all the disciplines that those students encounter in 6th grade, moving up through 7th and 8th. So it's on transferable vocabulary that we focused on there. For the other 2 courses that you see listed, make sure I'm sorry. The other 2 courses that you see listed under curriculum writing, you'll recognize those, I'm sure, because those are recent board-approved additions to our high school English list. We had the Literature of New York City run for the very first time. It's this past fall. And the second course is our blended digital journalism elective. You can see in the photo at the bottom, actually, Dr. Adley recently came up and visited with a student. It's running this semester for the very first time. And he was looking for some feedback on the experience of those students, because this is a very different course. It is a blend of traditional in-person classroom experience with digital meetings that happen outside of the classroom, where the teacher and the students meet together in digital spaces. I'll just say that so far the course has been a hit. The enrollment's ticking up upward for next year. So it's the first course of its kind in the district. It's kind of a cutting edge course. I'd like to see it that way. And if this goes well, we'll look to maybe do this with some other courses in the future. Moving ahead to our work with EduPlanet. In a moment, you heard Mr. Keeler, and certainly you've heard my department chair colleagues talk about long-term transfer goals. Certainly our department has collaborated on those as well. They're going to be on the next slide. So we have 5 long-term transfer goals that we have come up with as a department. We are still in the very early stages of our EduPlanet related work, but we have been using the English 10 course as our model template. We have also expanded the number of English teachers that are working on EduPlanet projects from 2 last spring to 8 this year. And we have embedded into our district PD work some grade level conversations about priority standards and essential questions and understandings and knowledge that students need. And those conversations are generating the framework for some of the unit work we'll be doing for EduPlanet for next year. I just want to linger one more minute on this slide, because you see a photo of the finalists for We participated in the Scripps Spelling Bee at the middle school for the first time in many, many, many years. It turned out to be a hit. All students were invited to participate in the classroom round of our school IB. We did conduct a student survey at the end to see whether or not students want us to continue to do this in the future. And the overwhelming response was very positive. They do want that. So that's exactly what we plan to do. So here are our long-term transfer goals. You will see echoes of these 5 goals again when I get to the very end of this presentation and provide you with an overview of our new approach to PD. But you can see here the focus is on language, it's on critical thinking, it's on creativity, it's on writing and voice, and certainly developing a love of language and reading. So now I'm going to get into student choice a bit, and I'm going to start with how we frame writing instruction at the middle school. And I know you're aware that at the middle school, our ELA units draw their inspiration from the units of study from the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. I think it is helpful to know that while our units are indeed informed by the units of study from the project, by far the most important connection that we have with the project is a shared philosophy for developing our young writers. We want our students to write a lot. We want them to understand the structural elements of our studied writing genres, and we want them to get their thinking on the page through the elaboration of their ideas. We also want to promote student talk in the classroom about writing and independent writing practice. And because we see that independent writing practice time as our opportunity to differentiate instruction, whether that be for individuals who write in conferences or for small groups. And during that practice time is where we push our students to make choices, not only on the selection of topics and claims and evidence, but on which strategies that they're going to use on a given class day. So rather than having all students practice the teaching point of a given lesson, our students, when they're doing the independent practice time, when our teachers check in with them, our students report on which aspect of their draft they're choosing to work on and which strategy they're going to be working on. So they need to make choices. They receive guidance from teachers, but we expect them to make choices. Now, I know that grammar instruction has popped up as a topic once or twice this year at some Board of Ed meetings. So I wanted to show you how we approach grammar and where student choice comes in. And in order to make sense of this, I have an example sentence. So I'll read it out loud for you. It's, when framed as techniques to try and not as rules to follow, the study of grammar leads to better student writing. Now, this I find to be true. And to better understand it, I need to reflect on how grammar instruction has changed over time and what it was like, at least back in the old days. So I'll use my example. And so my encounters with grammar instruction was a focus on terminology, because there are many, many terms for grammar concepts, and I'll get to some of those in a moment with this example. There was also a focus on recognizing those grammar concepts within examples. And of course, this depends upon a teacher, but in my experience, and a lot of our experiences, I'm sure, the focus was on adhering to grammar rules, right? And so this example sentence, if I just use this as an example of the terminology, this is an example of a complex sentence, which is simply a combination of a dependent clause and an independent clause. The dependent clause, which is in red, is the first element of the sentence, is technically an adverbial clause. It's an adverbial clause because it answers the question when the study of grammar leads to better student writing. It's when framed as techniques to try and not as rules to follow, okay? And then within that adverbial clause, there's an example of parallel structure, because we can compare as techniques to try with as rules to follow. So you can see just within this simple example, there's a lot of terms, and we don't want to overwhelm our students with terms because not all of them are high leverage terms that are going to translate into writing success, okay? So when I talk about writing choices, here's what I mean. If I take this same sentence and I simply take that dependent clause and I move it around, we can place it between the subject and the verb, and we have a perfectly fine, grammatically sound sentence. I can also move it to the very end position of that same sentence, and it makes perfect sense, as we can all see. And then if I want, I can even take that parallel structure and I can move that around as well. And though the words are the same in each of those examples, I hope you can see that there's a slightly different shade of meaning to all of those examples. There's a different emphasis. One of the reasons for that is we have this thing called end focus, where the end of sentences receive the most emphasis when people read them. So when students are allowed to experiment with sentences and relocate the elements of the sentences, they can create different shades of meaning for their readers and place emphasis on different elements within the lines, right? So there have been many studies on grammar, on the effectiveness of grammar instruction over time, over the last 100 years, really. And there is no clear evidence that links it to improved student writing outcomes. And I will say that over the course of my DHS teaching career, I conference with many, many students, and I always ask them to self-assess themselves on which areas of their writing were holding them back. Many of my students, sadly, attributed their some of the lack of success with writing with making grammar mistakes, okay? And I'm here to tell you the truth of the matter is that writers, right, that what's holding back most writers, especially at the high school level, was just needing more in the writing. And when I say more, I mean more elaboration, more evidence, more focus, and above all else, more willingness to take risks with their idea making. And those are the areas of focus that we are placing the biggest emphasis on with writing instruction at the middle school and the high school. And those are the areas that we feel lead to high leverage outcomes on the parts of our students. Now, having said all that, there is absolutely a place for grammar instruction in our curriculum. And we are reviewing our practices and looking for opportunities to do just that and include more grammar concepts in what we do. This summer, we have a Middlesex teacher team coming together to identify aspects of grammar instruction that would benefit from vertical alignment. We have a DHS teacher team that will be pursuing a similar goal, but through a different task. In this case, they'll be developing a writing handbook designed for students. And we have spent quite a bit of time, in fact, over the course of this year, reviewing and revising our Smarter Balance assessment units, focusing, because a lot of it focuses on grammar skills. And we have done work on embedding SBA question language into daily lessons as well. If I can shift over to reading, our philosophy with reading is also very much in line with the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. And it will also reflect some of the things I said about writing instruction. We want our students to read a lot. We want them to reflect on what they read. We want them to be looking for patterns when they read and recording their thoughts on those patterns in ways that help them make sense of the reading material. Choice plays a key role in how we differentiate instruction for our reading units. Our book club units not only allow us to differentiate based on student interest, but it also allows us to challenge our top readers and support our struggling readers by matching up books that are appropriate for those readers. Certainly, there are benefits to units organized around a whole class novel, and every grade level at the middle school has one. But student choice increases student engagement and allows for more targeted instruction. Now, over the course of the past 5 years, we have provided our DHS students with an increased number of choices as well, whether that's through book club units that we have brought to the high school over that time, through student-selected readings for final projects, through our English capstone graduation requirement term paper, and through the range of thematic literature courses that we offer our seniors. I would like to draw your attention to what we see as the next area of our curriculum that can be enhanced through increased student choice. And it's the last item listed on this particular slide. It's our junior year American literature courses. We are exploring ways to reimagine those courses so that they would still offer interdisciplinary opportunities for the paired American history courses, and still chronologically align with those history courses, and yet provide students with a much more focused thematic approach, which is what our seniors love about our grade 12 courses. So as an example, we could offer a section of American literature that traces the treatment of the environment in American literature. A course framed in that way could easily encompass many of the writers we already study: Emerson, Thoreau, Dickinson, Crane, Douglass, you name it. Many, many other writers would qualify, but with a sharper thematic focus for our juniors. We recently conducted a survey at the high school of our students and asking for feedback on this idea, and an overwhelming number of students thought that this would be a great direction to move our junior courses. And that leads me to two of the most important English course choices that students make at the secondary level. And those are the course choices they make for grades 8 and 9. In my eyes, both of those course choices are in need of serious reevaluation, and to understand why, a review of their respective histories is important. I'm going to start with grade 8. We have two courses in grade 8. We have English 8 and we have English 8 Advanced. English 8 Advanced has been in place long enough that I cannot definitively identify when it even came into existence. Okay, it's been around forever, as far as I know. I do know that before 2012, it featured a set of novels and other readings that were different from those studied in English 8, as you might expect. Our work with TC began in 2012, first in the form of piloted units, and then slowly, over time, additional units were added to every grade level at Middlesex. And since the workshop approach allows teachers to challenge high-performing students within a given classroom, the same units were introduced into both courses simultaneously. At the same time, in the name of expanding access to the course, a waiver system was introduced, moving from grade 7 to grade 8. As many of you know, we use assessment data in grade 7 to place students into English 8 Advanced. The waiver gave students and their parents a choice. They could override our placement decisions and access that advanced course. And over time, the number of students who have waived into English 8 Advanced has steadily grown. At this point in 2023, the curriculum of both of those courses is virtually identical. And each year we see an average of 55 students waive into the course. So for some perspective, that amounts to about 3 sections of a class that are waiving in. For the past 2 years, this has led to the following distribution of grade 8 ELA courses. We have 8 sections for the past couple of years of English 8 Advanced, 2 sections of English 8, and 8 sections of co-taught English 8. And so while the waiver in theory allows all students a choice whereby they can access English 8 Advanced, when you step back a bit and look at our placement procedures, a different picture begins to emerge, one that begs the question, for me at least, of why we go through such lengths to sort our 8th graders in the first place, and one that makes me uncomfortable with what I see as a disparity for who is represented in our advanced classes in grade 8. And while I know you'll have questions about this, if you can allow me to pause and just shift gears and look at 9th grade for a moment, because the choices that we provide our 9th grade students will reveal a different kind of issue. In grade 9, we offer 2 choices: our college prep level English 9 and our advanced level English 9 Accelerated. Other departments offer accelerated courses as well. We have one in world languages and we have one in math. The accelerated designation came about back in 1996, right? It came out of a NEASC report recommendation that we should be giving our ninth graders different types of experiences. So what happened was science wound up with an honors level course. History, as you know, has a heterogeneous year with Western Civ. The other departments were asked to offer an accelerated course, okay? And now I can't speak to what the course looked like in its early days back in 1996, but I can tell you that it's important to note that the DHS enrollment numbers in the mid-1990s, as you may know, were closer to 750, which is almost about half of what we have now at the high school. So to put things in perspective, at a school of that size in 1996, we're talking about one, maybe two sections of English 9 Accelerated, which would be taught by one teacher. Today, we're running 6 sections of the course taught by 3 teachers, and sometimes we have 4. We could run many more sections of the course, but many of our top performing students in ELA at the middle school, according to the data that I have, students that easily qualify for the course, and we use the same placement assessments that we do in grade 8 to make the placements from grade 8 to grade 9. I'm talking about students that are off charts that this course is designed for. Those students refrain from taking the course. While I can't, say why, because everyone's decision making is different, a key factor is a very practical one, and you know exactly what it is. It's the accelerated course designation does not carry the grade weighting that an honors and an AP course does. So unlike what we see in grade 8, right, the difference between English 9 and English 9 Accelerated is pronounced. The accelerated course is designed to be more challenging, with more readings, with more assignments, and more projects. This leads to another phenomenon that we witness every semester when a sizable number of students will level down, having started the course at the high school. This is very disruptive to student schedules, and it also swells the class sizes of English 9, right? And so we see this as an ongoing issue. No other advanced English course at the high school sees this type of drop of enrollment, not even close. And since our procedure for leveling down out of a course requires that students meet with a department chair, I can say from having met with every single kid who levels down, right, that most kids would elect to stay in the course if they receive the GPA boost that students get from our honors and our AP courses. Now, I may not agree with this logic. I don't, right? But I'm here to tell you that this logic absolutely exists in the minds of our students, and it leads to a disruptive exodus from a course that is designed to meet the needs of students who deserve to be challenged. And so, we're left with this. We strongly believe in student choice. But the choices, but our course choices that we're providing in grade 8 and grade 9 are not meeting the needs of enough of our students. For grade 8, it's a story about access. Students have access to the same teachers. The same 4 teachers teach all the levels of the course in 8th grade, okay? They have the same curriculum. They have access to the same curriculum, but they don't have access to the high-performing peers who serve as role models of the types of dispositions, habits, discourse level, and achievement that can raise expectations for all students if they're all in the same environment. In grade 9, to us, it's a simple matter of fairness, of recognizing the extra time, effort, and dedication put forth by students in the accelerated classes by changing the designation of that course. So, as you see on the slide, the English teachers and the building administration of both schools, the high school and the middle school, support the following 2 changes for the 2024-2025 school year. We would like to eliminate the English 8 advanced course at Middlesex and change the designation of English 9 Accelerated to English 9 Honors. Now, just one last thing, if we take a step back and we just think about our peers in Durg A, okay? I think it's worth pointing out that in Durg A, Middlesex is the only middle school with an advanced English course at the middle school level, Okay. And if we look at the high school in Dirt A, we have 2 high schools. Joel Barlow and us are the only 2 high schools that do not give their 9th graders an English honors experience. Now, I'm not saying we should make decisions based on what our peers do. And quite frankly, I think we deserve to be different in a lot of different ways. But I have what I believe to be compelling evidence that also supports this idea that I'd be happy to share with you whenever you'd like. And we believe that this is the time to be moving forward with these changes. And while I expect there's going to be a lot of questions about these recommendations, I have one last update that I need to share with you before I'm done. And that is how choice has been extended to teachers this year. Since choice informs so much of what we design for all of our students, I want to highlight that for PD this year, we moved from a very one-size-fits-all whole class novel approach to a model that is closer in spirit to a book club unit. Last spring, teachers were presented with a host of topics that were based upon our long-term transfer goals. Based on the choices, right? Our teachers made choices on what they wanted to focus on. We moved forward with what we call, we have 6, what we call expertise groups. You see them on the slide. The numbers at the end of each of those expertise groups represents the number of teachers that selected that particular group to join. Every group was equipped with professional publications and resources to support their research, and they were given PD time to work with group members to deepen their understanding of their choice. All of the secondary English teachers opted to make these expertise areas their teacher practice goal for the year. And I am pleased and proud of the professional learning growth that our teachers have demonstrated over the course of the year. This is a model that we plan to extend into the future, at least into the 2023-24 school year. And just finally, just to point out that I do have this link to a series of articles on grammar instruction for those folks who would love to explore those. So at this time, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Thanks for all the detail. I think probably makes sense to talk about the 8-9 classes first, because that's probably the biggest, meatiest chunk in here. I'm curious, the kids that waiver in, and the students that waiver into the accelerated English 8.
Yes.
And I know you can't, it's hard to maybe generalize this, but how successful are the students that parents and students waiver in versus those that you as teachers identify?
I'm very glad you asked, because this represents a very unique phenomenon in that I'll look back, I'm going to focus on the cohort that is presently studying at the high school in grade 9. I have all the data on that particular cohort. That year, so last year, we had 54 kids in our English 8 advanced course who had waived in. The total assessment data that we used to make those placements, that they weren't placed in the course, but they waived into the course, their assessment data was quite low, right? Of course, because that's why they weren't placed to begin with. The surprising thing for me to see is that the following year, when we have them take the DRP, we have them do a writing benchmark, the same cohort of students who waiver in to the advanced course, their performance level on our assessments goes way up, okay? In fact, when you disaggregate the different groupings, and if you disaggregate for the students in the advanced class, you include English 8, you include the cohort of students in English 8 co-taught who are not there receiving ELA services, let's say. You pull out our co-taughts, our students with plans. As you might expect, the students who are in the advanced classes score highest on all of the data, but the second group, the group that easily is in the second tier, are the kids who waive into the class. So to me, it seems to invite us to pull, I mean, I would say I attribute it to the, having these role models within the class they can look up to and emulate within the classroom. And I think if we extended that into all of our classes, we would see that kind of impact.
And to your point, the curriculum is the same. So in with the TC book club model, the teachers are able to differentiate
Yeah.
instruction, and those that, because I think I'm just, say we go through with this, I'm just
Mhm.
anticipating that some feedback is going to be, well, my child's not gonna be able to be challenged enough if I'm not in this next level course, right? But there is the ability to differentiate within, so those more advanced students will be able to think more deeply, challenge their writing, whatever it is.
Yeah, at this point, we have a curriculum that our teachers believe in, okay? Like I said, we don't use every lesson verbatim that you would find in one of the spirals that we, purchase as the,
Right.
they inform our units, but we don't, follow them exactly. But our teachers believe in the philosophy. And so right now, there would be no difference. I mean, we currently, our advanced level class, we are doing the exact same kind of challenging that we would do in our regular level English A class. So I anticipate that we would be able to provide the same level of challenge that we currently give to our advanced level courses.
And I would add to that, of course, that the key to not having parents and students concerned is communication, right? To make sure that everyone understands that that's how this transition will still allow students to be challenged at the appropriate levels, and give them greater opportunities for success and achievement. So I appreciate you bringing this to us. I have had questions about this
Yes.
for some time now.
Yes.
And I definitely think that it needs to be addressed. I think the 8th grade piece makes a lot of sense. I think the 9th grade piece, it also makes a lot of sense. I too struggle with the decision that students opt out, and there are few in my house who have opted out of this class because of the extra work, harder grading, and no GPA boost, so to speak.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of that, but unfortunately it's a reality that they live with. I think overall, we probably as a board and administration, I'd like us to have a conversation about honors creep. I'm making up a term here right now. If I look at my senior and my sophomore's transcripts, my sophomore had access to several more honors classes than my senior did as a freshman. The bio was the same. Math was different because they were different math levels. So there was an honors math class available to one student as a freshman and not the other. Language, because of our language acceleration now, starting in kindergarten, that was different for the two of them. And I think that there were reasons that we didn't offer freshmen too many honors classes coming into and starting their high school career. So I just want to make sure that we talk about that collectively as an overall at some point. But specific to this example, I absolutely support that they should be different classes, and that it should be an honors leveled class if they are in fact different classes. if
Yes.
that makes sense.
Can I speak to that a little bit too?
Can I just hold just for 1 second?
yes.
There's no way for me to make a simple translation, so I apologize. I'd like to thank my two colleagues for their presenting this morning. I just have to make a wee transition to Oxridge SSO PTO meeting this morning for 10 o'clock. Any changes to the curriculum such as being proposed? I think, but it would have to go through the board process to be approved. Chris can comment on where it is on the curriculum committee process at the school level. But it would obviously have to come through that process. But I want to thank you two this morning. Forgive me for just stepping out, but I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah, you were gonna say something. No,
Okay.
yeah.
I just want to point out the difficulty of the accelerated designation because what it's designed to be is like a middle, somehow taking this middle ground position in between our college prep level and an honors level class. When you don't have an honors level class at that same grade level to compare it to, quite naturally, and all the different department chairs who have an accelerated course will tell you this, you mentioned honors creep, it will naturally veer into, I would say, honors territory because you've got high performing kids and you have nothing else to compare it to. right? What can we, how can we know that what we're assigning kids or how we're approaching this is not honors level or it is accelerated level? So I'm sure in a smaller school environment, when this idea was debuted back in the 1990s, and certainly, as you know, with a lot of school initiatives, once a generation of teachers and administrators and students has moved on, once you inherit those things, they might look a little bit differently. And certainly where we are as a school with a much bigger school, it's much less personal now. We have a lot of different systems that we have in place. It's just very hard. And the more teachers you also bring into the fray, right? When you have more kids, when you have 3 or 4 teachers that are teaching this course, it's hard to, call it or keep it at whatever accelerated level even means, right? And so it's a frustration when parents hear that it's not supposed to be at honors level, right? But it's not also supposed to be at college prep level either. So it's very difficult for teachers to teach that kind of course.
I just want to add to that too, because we've had a lot of discussion about this and this topic. When I came on board, the first thing I did was have a meeting with every administrator, a one-on-one. And this is the first thing Francis talked to me about 3 years ago for about an hour. And I think he's done that as long as he's been in this role. So this is a passion of his for sure. In our conversations, we've been working really hard to talk about the difference between creating conditions that might increase student stress and anxiety based on their course load, and the importance of offering an appropriately rigorous course of study for students. So you can't completely talk about them separately, but the way that we're approaching this is, well, we have to talk about academically challenging students appropriately. And then we need to talk about, well, what's the educational component for making choices, for working with the counseling department to make sure students are making those choices, and working with families to let them know how to build a balanced course load. So those have been very important parts
And I
of
just
all the
think
conversations.
operationally, I mean, you talked to the disruption of the leveling down, and I think taking that piece out of it would be super beneficial for
Yeah.
for everybody.
If I can piggyback
Yeah,
on that
sure.
comment just for a moment. So one of the great things that I think all the department chairs are very proud of is, we have put in place at the 8th grade to 9th grade level at the high school, a waiver, okay, for all students to provide better access to all of our honors and AP and advanced courses, right? And with that waiver, so if you think about the accelerated course as it presently stands, and we're thinking about, not causing undue stress for kids, certainly they have conversations with counselors, but one part of the waiver process is department chairs need to sign off on that. And so what that ensures is a conversation with every student. And you can bet that the very first thing we do is ask them, well, what other courses are you taking? And we talk about the course, we get a sense of where they're coming from. And I'll just, it's not a stamp of approval. We want to make sure that every kid is appropriately placed. Our goal is to ensure that kids are placed at the level where they're going to find success. Now, we do have kids who want to challenge themselves, and the waiver process allows for that. That's good. So our conversations have gone from a little bit of a gatekeeper to now providing the best information possible so students can make smart choices. Will students make choices that put them in a position where they have maybe too many courses? Yes, but department chairs are not all powerful, and no one is in the system. And we have to just equip kids with as much information as we can so they can make smart choices and provide them with guidance.
Other thoughts? Thank you. And generally, thank you. I appreciate how responsive the presentation was. And I'm sure you will tee this up at our next board meeting in your committee report. But I think this would be a very valuable meeting for some board members and some public members to
Sure.
go back and rewatch the example of how the 10th grade curriculum revisions was approached.
Mhm.
I thought was particularly helpful. I don't have an education background, so that was, it was nice to have that very simply laid out. So thank you for
Yes.
that. I also liked what I'll call your Eats, shoots, and leaves example of grammar and moving the dependent clause around.
Mhm.
Mr. Keeler still wins for the videos, but I enjoyed your examples as well this morning.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, does Strunk and White still exist? Do they use Elements of Style? Is that still a thing?
My preference is a book. So Elements of Style is something that I and a lot of us used back in the day. It was certainly a writing companion at college. I have an affinity for E.B. White, and of course, his Professor Strunk was the one who made such an impression upon him, and so that was a great read. It's a bit dated, and so there is another similar handbook called Style by Joseph Williams. It's been in print for many, many years, since the early 80s. But what I love about this particular book is it reflects the approach to grammar that I am trying my best to explain in terms of not seeing it as rules. And it even talks about certain tiers of rules that are not really rules, but conventions in society. We follow them anyway, and you should feel free to break them. And it talks about different types of situations where you should feel free to do that sort of thing. So I prefer that as a style manual, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a place in my heart for Strunk and White, because that's how things go.
A couple of questions about the grammar discussion. And I don't know if you'll be able to know this yet, as I don't know if we've had enough years, but as we have transitioned the K-2 literacy curriculum into being maybe a little more explicit in terms of phonics and spelling and that kind of stuff, I'm wondering if you're seeing if that has hit the middle school yet. Is anecdotally, I think middle school students are not spelling well, and I don't know if we're seeing any difference.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of anecdotal reviews of our student writing performances. And I'll just say to that, look, we all want our students to create drafts that have a polished sheen to them at the end, with every T crossed and I dotted and all that. I'm not, and we try our best. I mean, we talk about the editing process, but we also talk about the difference between revising work and editing, which are two different things. We need to do a little bit more with doing a pre-assessment when it comes to some of these concepts in 6th grade, right? Unfortunately, some of the ways that we approach it is anecdotal. We do note, I mean, certainly there are differences, with kids coming up from different elementary schools, right? There are some differences. I'm sure that we see that in every discipline. But we have yet to see any real impact from some of the changes they're doing K-5.
I don't think the wave has hit yet for the students when.
Right, I think we have still a couple of years to see what's going to come out of that. Another just quick question about TC. There's been some criticism of TC at the elementary level.
Yes.
Are you confident that what we are doing at the middle school is meeting the needs of our students?
Yeah, as you know that, and certainly our public, I think, is aware. Certainly Lucy Calkins and the entire project has been in the news quite frequently over the past few years. And the focus has been on K-2 reading and phonics and phonemic awareness. And we've always had something in place to address that, right? So we've known about that from the very beginning. That really doesn't affect what we do at the middle school. And I have had conversations where I've asked the middle school, right, after having gone through all the PD and all the curricular changes that we've gone through over the last 10 years, is this something that we still believe in and we want to move forward with it? And I'll have to tell you that this is something that they believe in.
Okay.
And, yeah, as a philosophy.
Okay, thank you. I'm good. All right. This was a long meeting. Thank you guys
I know.
very much. It was
Interesting.
it was really, really great. So thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you so much.
Anything to add? Okay, motion to adjourn.
Public comment.
Oh, public comment every single time.
Anyone in person?
We have people here because we borrowed an audience from the next meeting.
There are
No.
no raised hands.
Okay, now may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Okay, I'll second. Thank you.